Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, December the 22nd, 2025. There isn't a great deal going on today. Perhaps we're sort of recovering from the new moon, followed by the solstice. But one thing we do have is a conjunction between the moon and Pluto in Aquarius, and I want to look at this aspect, at the end of the video in some detail. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, December the 22nd, 2025, and here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time. And don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So at noon in New York, there is a conjunction between the moon and Pluto, and the moon is in Aquarius. So, the moon moves into Aquarius today at 8 minutes to 4 in the afternoon, just before 4 o'clock in the afternoon, London time. So, if you're in the United States, the moon will move into Aquarius, this morning. So that does create a bit of a change. We've got a planet in air signs. We've got Pluto in an air sign, of course, Pluto in Aquarius, but it's really been sort of holding the fort. Not much support there, and because it's Pluto, a transpersonal planet, we don't always feel Pluto's influence. But now that the moon is in Aquarius, well, there is some air, and I think it may, to an extent, activate Pluto, and that's something I want to consider at the end of a video when I look at what the Moon-Pluto conjunction might mean. So this this Moon-Pluto conjunction takes place sort of relatively sort of late in the day, and it's not necessarily going to be decisively important for all of us. But I think perhaps the main importance of this Moon-Pluto conjunction is that it just gives us a reminder. Sometimes we forget that Pluto is in Aquarius. Especially now, because we've got Saturn, and you see Saturn, Neptune, and Aries. They've gone back into negative signs. Saturn and Neptune have gone back into Pisces. Uranus has gone back into Taurus. But Pluto doesn't go back into Capricorn. Pluto is still there, and I think that we're seeing its influence all the time. For example, governments trying to assert their control. As you know, I think that Pluto is about totalitarianism, but it's also Pluto is about totalitarianism when it's in Aquarius, but it's also about the desire for freedom, and there is that sort of constant sort of conflict we have with Pluto and Aquarius. All of us want to be free. We don't like government interference, or okay, many of us, maybe some of us, appreciate government interference, but then the governments feel they do have to be in control. They want to control social media. They want to control the media in general, and if you're in the UK, governments are cancelling elections. Okay, they might be local elections, but still it's governments being afraid. So that may be a Pluto theme. And today with the Moon-Pluto conjunction, there could be sort of issues of power. Who is in control? How independent are we? Aside from that, well, just before the moon moves into Aquarius, well, it's in late Capricorn, and moon in late Capricorn, it makes makes an opposition to Jupiter, makes a sextile to Saturn, and these are quite sort of minor aspects. And with the moon in late Capricorn, well, moon sextile Saturn is its last aspect before leaving the sign. So that moon sextile Saturn is about perhaps having some control over things, being able to just create some order. That's what we're trying to do. But once the moon makes that sextile to Saturn, it's void. It's made its last major aspect to a traditional planet. When you're working out the void of course, whether the moon is void of course, you don't count the discovered planets. You don't count Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and Uranus, Neptune. Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. Those three planets. You don't count those, and so there might be a feeling that it's some part of the day just nothing much is going on. The beginning of the day, for example, if you're in Europe. Did I say that? Yeah, the beginning of the day. So, for example, if you're in the UK, Moon goes into Aquarius at 10 to 4 in the afternoon. Before 10 to 4 in the afternoon, yeah, it just seems nothing much is going on. Then the moon moves into Aquarius. That's when things start happening. When the moon, for example, starts slowly making a sextile to Mercury. But overall, that moon sextile Mercury, that doesn't take place for a long time. And this makes me think that for many of us, not much is going on. So I mean, I know you want to know what today's going to be like, and I would have said today, yeah. I mean, today is maybe quite quiet. And again, it just may be because we've just had all this excitement over the weekend. It's a solstice, and we've got we've had a new moon, but now that's the way it is. And I think this week, if you listen to my preview of the week when I put out that video a day or two ago, yeah, I wasn't particularly impressed by what was unfolding. And of course that links nicely with the Christmas week, because we've got Christmas Day coming up. And so yeah, maybe you shouldn't worry too much about astrology. Maybe it's all up to you what happens. So that is the picture set. If we set the chart for New York, if we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is not going to move into Aquarius today. The moon is in late Capricorn, all day long, and probably the main aspect for you, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, is moon sextile Saturn. And moon sextile Saturn is an aspect which is, it's fairly low key. It's just about organizing things, getting yourself together, creating some kind of structure. And if you can do that, that may be enough. So all things being equal, I don't think there's a huge amount going on. Okay, the moon does trine Uranus, does sextile Neptune as well, but perhaps with moon trine Uranus, there may appear to be some excitement towards the end of the day, something interesting going on. Maybe it also could be slightly disturbing, but where is it all going? I don't think it's going anywhere. And then there is a heliocentric view. So looking at things from a heliocentric viewpoint, the Earth comes to mind. So remember, the heliocentric chart looks at things from the sun's perspective. You put the sun at the center of the chart. So that means, there's no sun in this chart. There's the Earth instead. And the Earth is always dead opposition where the sun is. So the Earth at 1 degree 6 Cancer is making a square to Saturn and Neptune. So last week we had geocentrically the Sun making squares to Saturn and Neptune. Now Saturn and Neptune in the heliocentric chart are pretty close to where they are in the geocentric chart. So now we're seeing those aspects: Sun square Saturn, Sun square Saturn, Sun square Saturn, Sun square Neptune in a heliocentric light. So today we do have Earth square Saturn, Earth square Neptune, and that might represent uncertainty. We're not quite sure where things are going, how things are going to develop. And with Earth square Neptune, that is the confusion. Earth square Saturn, that is us perhaps having to face reality. But you put Saturn and Neptune together, remember we've got a pretty close Saturn-Neptune conjunction anyway, and the Earth is picking it all up. So it could be a time when that uncertainty really starts to manifest. Yeah, sure, we would like to merge with something beyond ourselves, but in the process, we have to give up everything, and we don't want to give up everything. We want to hold on to what we have, and yeah, that could be tough. And the Earth, once it's made that that square to Saturn and Neptune, it moves on, and it will slowly move towards an opposition of Mars. So I think that today there could be some uncertainty in the air, just a feeling of worry. But I'm not convinced it's going to necessarily manifest. Not least because the moon is potentially going to be void of course for much of the day. So really, I don't think there is a great deal to report, and I now want to switch to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, December the 22nd, 2025. Aries. It's the end of the year. We got the run up to Christmas, and you might want to enter into the spirit of things. But the question is, should you enter into the spirit of things? Maybe you've got other priorities, and we do have the Sun and Mars in Capricorn. Now we're going to have Sun and Mars in Capricorn for quite a long time, until the end of January. And of course, more planets will be soon entering Capricorn. Venus is getting ready to move into Capricorn. But you think that with Sun and Mars, it might be a problem having those two sort of heavy, fiery, dynamic, potentially quite violent planets in Capricorn. And with Mars moving towards a conjunction of Sun, the Sun, Mars is, you could say, you can say it is combust. However, I don't necessarily think that need be too much of a problem, provided you handle things right. And I think that with Sun-Mars, that Sun-Mars conjunction in Capricorn, it could spur you to involve yourself in new things. Additionally, there's a question of what is it that you want to do? What do you want to get off the ground? You are impatient, and the beginning of the week just before Christmas, do you want to waste the opportunity? Maybe there are things you really can do, things that could have a lasting value. So if you're working around now, perhaps over Christmas, but at least before Christmas, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, certainly Monday and Tuesday is still working days. So Aries, I would urge you to do what you can, and of course at the beginning of the day we've got the moon in Capricorn as well, and if you're in Australia and New Zealand, you're going to have moon in Capricorn all day long. So use that Capricorn energy regardless of where you are, and think about what it is that you want to achieve, and don't get too caught up in other people's priorities. Other people might be relaxing, they might be easing off the pressure, but I think the pressure is still very much there, and I think that might be a good thing. Additionally, we do have the moon moving into Aquarius, and certainly if you're in the United States, this morning moon moves into Aquarius. If you're in Europe, mid-late afternoon, you've got the moon moving into Aquarius. That does create a certain change of emphasis. I mean, you've still got the ambition of Sun Mars in Capricorn, but with the moon moving into Aquarius, there are other things going on, and like it or not, you have to take into account what other people are doing. Not necessarily people who are close to you, but it's just the group, the collective, your friends perhaps, your associates, people you have to meet all the time, and you perhaps are trying to get the balance right. The moon is not just moving into Aquarius, it's moving towards a conjunction of Pluto. And so where you got Pluto, there is a feeling of power and obsession and control. And so when you are with other people, there may be this underlying question of who's making the plans, who's making the arrangements. Is anyone maybe taking up too much of your time? Sometimes people take up other people's time almost as a way of demonstrating their power, and that's not something you want to fall into, because Aries, I do think that you have actually got quite a lot of stuff to do, and I don't think you want to get too distracted, but you've kind of got to sort of show some lip service to friends, other people. They can't be totally ignored with Moon moving into Aquarius, but at the same time, Moon in Aquarius conjunct Pluto, it can be about independence, perhaps ruthless independence, and you need to demonstrate that you are somewhat aloof, that you don't have to get 100% involved in other people's games. Taurus. I was just talking to Aries, and I was encouraging Aries to make the most of the day. That there are things that definitely need to be done. It's not just about being easygoing, relaxed, getting into the Christmas spirit. And I'd probably say a similar thing to you, particularly late in the day, because we do have the moon moving into Aquarius. The moon, moving into Aquarius. Well, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon won't move into Aquarius until tomorrow, but it'll get there, in the end. And one of the main themes of this video, the main theme, in fact, is the fact that we have a conjunction between the moon and Pluto. And Taurus, I do think that this conjunction between the moon and Pluto could have an impact on you. It may be something you just notice, and you notice that Pluto's in Aquarius. Pluto's always been in Aquarius, but perhaps you'd been ignoring the fact that Pluto is in Aquarius, but now Pluto wants attention. And with this Moon-Pluto conjunction, it could be about your obsession with who you are and where you are going and how you are developing. I mean, I say obsession, I don't mean obsession necessarily in a bad way. It can be good to be obsessed. Taurus can be very persistent, and maybe you need to make the most of this persistence. There are things that you can achieve, and you don't have to feel that it needs to be done in a way that is regular, that just follows other people, that just doesn't rock the boat. Maybe you have to rock the boat. I mean, you don't have to rock the boat. If you're ignored, you don't have to rock the boat. If you're just doing things in your own way, I mean, you're not going to tread on anyone's toes. You have a vision. It's your vision. You plow forward with this vision, and it's certainly the right thing to do. And you realize that you very much can have an impact. Of course, if other people try to get in your way, then that might be a problem. I think it might be a problem for them. I think if you want to be, you can be a real steamroller today. But don't be worried. Don't be afraid. Don't worry that you're doing something wrong. Don't be too self-conscious. You could be. I mean, remember that Venus has just made a square to Saturn. So Venus is your ruler. It made the square to Saturn over the weekend, and so when Venus squares Saturn, it might be difficult. It might have been difficult. You might not have been fully able to express yourself. And then Venus is also making a square to Neptune. In a couple of days' time, Venus will make that square to Neptune. So Venus is squaring the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And so Venus square the Saturn-Neptune midpoint is about you being nervous, you being unsure of yourself, perhaps not feeling that you're not good enough. But these are illusions. The reality is, with that Moon conjunct Pluto, the headline aspect of the day, as far as I'm concerned, with that Moon conjunct Pluto, you are powerful, and you can really plow forward, with whatever you need to do. So do not doubt yourself, and don't allow yourself to be ground down. And additionally, Taurus, you're increasingly in a sort of a transitional stage here, because Venus, it does make a square to Saturn and Neptune. It's also in a late Sagittarius. It's conjunct the galactic center, and maybe the conjunction to the galactic center, I forget where the galactic center is. It's sort of 26, 27 Sagittarius. So yeah, I mean, Venus is in the approximate area of the galactic center, and the galactic center might really work for you. The galactic center is about looking at things sort of beyond yourself. You're not tied to any one thing, and you can see the big picture with the galactic when Venus is on the galactic center. You firstly look at yourself. You perhaps go deeply into yourself and who you are, and then you look out. You look at the universe around you, and suddenly it all makes sense, and you become part of something that is much larger than yourself. And it's an experience which is very positive, and then that feeds into the Moon-Pluto conjunction, and the Moon-Pluto conjunction gives you the inspiration and the self-belief to see everything through, and you don't have to be worried about any potential for fear, which I talked about with Venus square Saturn and Neptune. It is just fear, but it's not real. And also Venus square Saturn, that Venus square Saturn, okay, it was exact over the weekend, but it's still with you. Venus square Saturn allows you to be persistent, to ignore other people, for example, who may be unhelpful. They may be trying to sort of get you down. They may be trying to create some negativity. Yeah, I mean, spending too much time with other people may not be the right thing to do, because they might be negative, they might not be encouraging, but the encouragement comes from you. So Taurus, I think you've got what it takes. And so really do believe in yourself. I think that really is important. Gemini, we're getting some air now. Moon is moving into Aquarius. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon doesn't move into Aquarius until tomorrow, but it's getting there. And perhaps you needed that air. You needed some space. You needed to breathe, because it perhaps has become a little bit suffocating with not much air in the sky. Well, completely reliant on Pluto in Aquarius, and of course, Gemini, you are an air sign. So, Moon moving into Aquarius is something you're very much going to appreciate. If you're in the United States, then this morning a Moon moves into Aquarius. If you're in Europe, mid-late afternoon, a Moon moves into Aquarius. The same if you're in Africa. So suddenly you have more room, and you have more space, and you can start to think, and you can start to imagine. And that's very important if you're a Gemini. You need to have an imagination. You need to be thinking about something. Geminis are always thinking. The Gemini mind doesn't stop, and the Gemini mind does like to think about the future. I mean, I think that can be a problem with Geminis. They do find it quite difficult to live in the present. It can be about regretting the past and hoping the future is going to be better. But you do need a sense of the future, and perhaps recently the future may have just sort of disappeared a bit. But now the future is becoming back in focus with the moon moving into Aquarius, and it's making a conjunction to Pluto. So that Moon-Pluto conjunction is going to start to give you something to hold on to, something to think about, something to spur you to have hopes and also dreams. Though, when you're dealing with hopes and dreams, you don't want them to just sort of disappear. And it can disappear, especially at this time of year. I think the problem, Gemini, might be that you've been trying to think about something, you've been trying to engage positively, and you kind of get there, and then the danger is that you get distracted by all the Christmas stuff and even the New Year, and then you lose it. So, yeah, maybe you should just maintain your focus on the dream, whatever that dream might be. And, if you can do that, then, that might be a good way of using the day's energies. And don't be afraid of being original. Originality does matter. You are original by virtue of you being a Gemini, but right now you can perhaps take things further. You have the capacity to really stand out as someone who is different, different in the right sense of a word, not weird. Okay, sometimes there's nothing wrong with being weird, but you have a different perspective, and I think, Gemini, that this different perspective is going to be very much appreciated, and perhaps that is something that you can share in the end. And maybe if you're just very clear about who you are and what you want, in the end people are going to understand. Cancer. The moon is leaving Capricorn, moving into Aquarius, but while it's doing this, it doesn't actually do very much. Okay, the moon does make a conjunction to Pluto, and I will be saying something about that, but there is a feeling that the moon is not applying to anything permanent, that things are not necessarily that things are not necessarily going anywhere. So while the moon is moving through Capricorn, it's largely void. Okay, the moon makes a sextile to Saturn at the beginning of the day. Having made that sextile to Saturn, then it makes an opposition to Jupiter, and so that moon opposition Jupiter, that's the last aspect the moon makes before it leaves the sign. And after that moon opposition Jupiter, it's that's it. So there may be a feeling, Cancer, that you are applying to nothing, and so that. Well, let's get the sequence right. The moon makes an opposition to Jupiter, then it makes a sextile to Saturn, and then it's not making an aspect to any other traditional planet. So that could say something about the day. And then the moon moves into Aquarius. It does make a conjunction to Pluto, and after that, again, the moon is applying to a sextile of Mercury, but it just doesn't make that sextile for ages. So what I'm trying to say in a rather convoluted way, Cancer, is that nothing much might be going on. It could be a day when you might see things that you want to be involved with, but try as you might, it just doesn't come together. And that might be a good thing, because it doesn't put so much pressure on you. There's nothing you have to do, because expectations are going to be quite limited. I mean, with Moon sextile Saturn at the beginning of the day, that should mean that relationships should work pretty well. Certainly if you're in Australia or New Zealand, Moon sextile Saturn is the main aspect of the day, arguably. And so with that moon sextile Saturn, you have the chance to be creative and clever in the way you deal with other people, and so that means relationships should go to plan, and perhaps you can create some level of sort of structure and sort of reliability. But still, there's a feeling that, yeah, well, where is it going? And then the moon makes a conjunction to Pluto. So moon conjunct Pluto is, okay, it's the main aspect of the day, arguably. It's what I want to talk about in this video. But this moon conjunct Pluto, it could take up some of your time, particularly if you're in the Americas with this moon conjunct Pluto. It takes up perhaps some of your emotional time, and some people can underestimate that. If you are emotionally involved with something, it's not necessarily exhausting, but it is time consuming. And maybe some Cancerians will find themselves just brooding a bit, feeling that there's something that you have to focus on in your inner world. It's not necessarily anything that you want to talk about. It's not necessarily bad, but you're just perhaps taking into account sort of a different set of realities. Maybe you're experiencing change, and also you're starting to value your independence. That does matter. Being free to do what you want in your own way, and not having to apologize for it. And that could be a good reason why you want to keep quiet. Why should you have to explain or apologize your particular view? You are independent. You value your independence, and really, it might be as simple as that. Now, talking about independence, well, if we're talking about independence, we're talking about also other people and what your relationship is to them. Just a reminder that we've just had the solstice when the sun moves into Capricorn. The sun is starting to make a conjunction to Mars, and this Sun-Mars conjunction is in Capricorn. It's in your opposite sign, and this conjunction is certainly not exact by any means, but it is potentially about other people. And maybe with Sun and Mars now in Capricorn, you're starting to recognize that not everyone gets on with each other, that there are real fractures around, and that there's certainly a potential here for having disagreements. I'm not saying that there's going to be disagreements over Christmas, but the sun is moving closer and closer to Mars. And so when you think about other people, particularly the important people in your life, you might also be thinking about how you might be different to them. Where are the differences? And where are the fault lines? Because those fault lines may become increasingly clear as that Sun-Mars conjunction gets closer and closer. But on the other hand, there's always two ways of looking at it. Mars in Capricorn, Sun in Capricorn might represent a dynamic person, and maybe at some level you need another person's dynamism to sort of challenge you so that you can sort of move yourself to the next level. But this is something general, this Sun-Mars conjunction, this growing Sun-Mars conjunction in Capricorn. It's not specific to today. Leo, if you've been listening to my forecasts of the signs so far, you sort of might have noticed that I'm rather downbeat. I'm not seeing a huge amount of action. I don't think it's going to be a particularly active day for most of us, regardless of our sign. And so, as far as you're concerned, Leo, there may be things that you want to get out of the way. And if you've got something that you want out of the way, well, you might as well go for it. Now is as good a time as any. So it might be for you just a quiet Monday, a Monday where you know that you have certain responsibilities. I think that you're going to be very good at executing these responsibilities, and additionally, you're going to have a fine eye for detail. But if you do want to be with other people, well, it's possible that they can be useful, and you will be helped by the fact that you continue to be quite charming. And it's because of the Sun being on the Venus-Mars midpoint. You can see astrologically, if you look at the chart, the Sun is halfway between the conjunction to Venus and the conjunction to Mars. I mean, the Sun is making conjunctions to both Venus and Mars. I mean, okay, rather wide conjunctions, but still the Sun remains on the Venus-Mars midpoint. And that's going to be the case for some time, because the Sun, Venus, and Mars are moving at approximately the same speed. So you have got it. It is powerful. Maybe not as powerful as over the weekend when the Sun moved into Capricorn, but you know how to get people's attention. Yeah, it may not be as easy as it was yesterday over the weekend, but if you need anyone's help, if you need to charm anyone, I think that there is always a way to do it. Though now that the Sun is in Capricorn, it might be the case that it takes a bit of work, a bit of preparation. You need to consider maybe who you are dealing with and which details need to be taken care of. Now, we do have the Moon moving into Aquarius. Okay, not if you're in Australia, but if you're in Europe, then late in the day, Moon will be in Aquarius. This morning, Moon moves into Aquarius. So as the Moon moves into Aquarius, that may say more about other people, maybe particular people. The Moon is moving into Aquarius. It's moving into your opposite sign. Aquarius is opposition Leo, and it's there then making a conjunction to Pluto. So having a Moon conjunct Pluto, it may occur to you that certain people matter. You don't necessarily want them to matter, but they're there, and they just can't be ignored. And you therefore have to adopt the right approach. Yeah, you can't ignore certain people, but then on the other hand, you don't want to be overwhelmed by them. So you have to pay certain people, maybe partners, people you spend a lot of time with, you have to pay them some attention, but you don't have to, pay them loads of attention. And perhaps you need to be, quite disciplined with that Moon conjunct Pluto. People are making demands, and the question is, to what extent do you give in to those demands? I don't think you do give in to the demands, but you just you show an awareness, and I think that is a key point, Leo. Showing an awareness of other people's needs without necessarily giving in to them, and that way you get the balance right. Virgo. I think, Virgo, that you would like everything to be simple and relaxing and easy, and not to have to worry about anything. But the reality is that it might be difficult. There could be distractions. You might have to worry about what other people want, what other people are doing, what other people are saying, and that could be disruptive. And what is being disruptive is maybe your peace of mind, your tranquility, maybe even your domestic tranquility. And so perhaps, Virgo, you have to work out what stance to take. Just because someone is trying to undermine your comfort, make you feel uneasy, it doesn't mean you should give in to that pressure. Now it could be that there are good reasons why you need to, pay attention to what's going on, why you can't be complacent. Things are changing. Things are moving, but you don't want to exaggerate. And I think it's important today to really consider other people's motivations. And remember, we've just had Venus making a square to Saturn, and we're about to have Venus making a square to Neptune. Venus is picking up on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And so, Virgo, don't allow yourself to be unnecessarily, pulled off course. And you have to look after yourself, and you also have to think about who you are and what you're good at. And particularly at the beginning of the day, while the moon is moving through late Capricorn. It might be all day if you're in Australia or New Zealand. The moon is moving through late Capricorn. With the moon being an earth sign, you do have the opportunity not just to feel comfortable, but also to feel creatively comfortable, feeling that you're in the right place and that you're doing something that really is worthwhile. Now, in the end, the moon does move into Aquarius, and there's a conjunction between the moon and Pluto in Aquarius. And I think that the changeover from Capricorn to Aquarius just may be that you have to accept a changing situation, that you can't just look at things in terms of what is easy. You have to also consider what requires your attention and what requires your effort. But if you realize that something has to be done, that you have to maybe organize something, that doesn't mean that you have to just follow the book. You have to follow what other people say, follow what authority figures say, follow the tradition. No, there is a conjunction between the moon and Pluto in Aquarius, and this Moon-Pluto conjunction, is encouraging you to do things differently. You can be responsible and you can be organized, but in such a way that is you. And so whatever you're doing, Virgo, it really is important that you don't forget your fundamental individuality, even if you're doing something which on the surface seems quite routine, even boring. And overall, Virgo, I think that today you are able to really stand out as a unique individual in your own way. I mean, that you're a unique individual. Other people, they may or may not. I mean, people who know you well, who respect you, can see your individuality. Other people who don't know you quite so well, they might not understand you, they might misinterpret what you're doing. But if you stay firm to what you believe in, then I'm confident that you can have in your own way quite a dramatic impact. And certainly, Virgo, there is absolutely no need to be ignored. You're someone who can be powerful and can also be stubborn, and sometimes there is a place for stubbornness. And you shouldn't allow yourself to be gaslit. You know how to do things. You know the best way of doing things in most cases, at least today you do. And so, don't be told that you've got it wrong, that you've understood something wrong. You've understood things absolutely correctly. And if you use that understanding and you use your knowledge, then, your way is going to be the best way. Libra. So we just had Venus making a square to Saturn, and Venus is now applying to a square of Neptune, and Venus is right now on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, square the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. So Libra, with Venus in this position, you might have your doubts. You might not be entirely sure. A lot of things you're not absolutely sure about. And in some respects, that is a good thing. I mean, certainty can be dangerous because, if you're absolutely certain about something, then you can commit yourself to doing things which which could turn out to be dangerous, and could sort of be ultimately, if you're not careful, you could sort of drive yourself off a cliff. So a bit of worry is always a good thing. But what you don't want to happen is for this worry to get out of control. And there may be things that you're obsessing about, and you're obsessing about them, and you start to sort of imagining things. So what is it that you are worried about? It could be just small details, things that in the grand scheme of things aren't very important, but for some reason you just take them in a way that is deadly serious. Or it could be some aspects of your health. I don't want to make you worried about your health, and I'm not saying anything anything bad is going to happen, but it might be a time when you need to confront certain aspects of your health. But if you've been worrying about anything about in terms of your health, if there has been a worry, and there could be some worries, if that's the case, then maybe you need to just address the issue directly. And by addressing the issue, then you're going to you may have a chance to make things better. You may be able to put your mind at ease. And again, I must make it absolutely clear, I'm not saying you've got health problems or any health problems you don't know about. I'm thinking more about the way your mind is working, about your cognitions about your own health. All of us, have times when we just get really worried about something connected with our body, and we can sort of go into sort of flights of fear. And I'm just saying that with Venus making the square to the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, that could be the case. So in a way, there is maybe a reassuring message about Venus square Saturn-Neptune. So if you find yourself worrying about your health and well-being, it just might be something to do with the temporary influence of Venus aspecting Saturn and Neptune. Venus in Sagittarius. Venus in Sagittarius can go all over the place. It can get overloaded, with information, and perhaps that's what you want to do. So there is an argument certainly for finding out about something, for looking up on the internet, how things are. But there's also an argument for not asking too many questions, because if you ask loads of questions in an undisciplined kind of way, then you could drive yourself crazy, and that is absolutely not what we want to happen. Now, there is a lunar sign change going on today. So the moon starts in Capricorn, then it moves into Aquarius. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon doesn't move into Aquarius until tomorrow, Tuesday. But the moon moving into Aquarius is, I would have said, as far as you're concerned, something that is fortunate. The moon in Aquarius, it is in an air sign. It's about movement. It's about space. It's about creativity, and it's also about you not being self-obsessed, because that can be what happens. When you've got the moon in Capricorn, if you are a Libra, because the sign Capricorn, it's a sign which is right at the bottom of your chart. It's very much focused on yourself and your own interests, and perhaps your family and your home, and it can just get all too much. And so when the moon moves into Aquarius, well, maybe you have a chance to get obsessed about something else. Moon is making a conjunction to Pluto. So yeah, Moon-Pluto conjunction can be obsessive, but what are you being obsessed about with that conjunction being in Aquarius? Well, you can be obsessed about who you are, what you're good at, and how you can be genuinely original and genuinely creative. So do make the most of that, and do consider your own independence. It's a time of year when it can sometimes be difficult to be independent because there are a lot of social pressures when in a run up to Christmas. But I think sort of Monday, Tuesday, as Wednesday, as the moon moves through Aquarius, you have a chance to decide on your own path, and then, of course, we've got Venus moving into Capricorn. I mean, I'll be talking about Venus moving into Capricorn in a couple of days' time, and I've just said that there are certain disadvantages of the sign Capricorn from a Libran perspective. But I think Venus moving into Capricorn is going to work in your favor in many respects. But I'll be talking about that in a day or two's time. Scorpio. Well, I've been telling people that today needn't be such a big deal. There's nothing hugely dramatic going on today, Scorpio. I don't think there's anything that you need to write home about. Maybe that's a good thing. And you've got the moon starting to move into Aquarius, and we know with the moon moving into Aquarius, well, Aquarius for you, Scorpio, is a sign that is very personal. It's very much about you. And it's nothing to be shared. And so as moon moves into Aquarius, you might feel that you don't want to be part of things. You want to do things just in your own way, especially as the moon is moving towards a conjunction of Pluto. Well, the moon does make a conjunction to Pluto. Okay, it might be tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand that you get that Moon-Pluto conjunction, but it's there. And I will be talking a lot about the Moon-Pluto conjunction later in this video. But you might say with the Moon-Pluto conjunction that you want to do things your way, and you don't really want too many people around you. I mean, why bother? Other people may just be more trouble than they're worth. Although with that Moon-Pluto conjunction, there may be issues regarding your family or your home, perhaps real estate. If you're involved in real estate, you could find that Moon-Pluto conjunction is a point of obsession. It's something that you're worked up about. You think that it's tremendously important, maybe more important than it actually is. And the same goes with your family. I mean, your family could take up a lot of your attention. You may find yourself thinking about your family. You may be thinking about your home, and maybe thinking too much about it. And what you don't want, Scorpio, is for your imagination in general to run away with you. I mean, it might do, and you might find yourself dwelling on the negatives. It's easy to dwell on the negatives at the moment. You might imagine, all of the things that could go wrong, and when you look around you, there is a tinge of negativity, definitely. And additionally, your imagination may be conjuring up something else, something darker. You kind of feel that there are dark forces out there that could engulf you. I'm not saying they are, by the way. I'm just saying this is your perception. And so, Scorpio, be careful what you put your energy into. We have to think about you, what you are doing. At the moment, Mars is in Capricorn, so overall, with Mars in Capricorn, you're able to be very focused. I mean, I've talked about Mars being in Capricorn. It's exalted. You can put your energy into things in a way that is very constructive. But just today, there might be something negative creeping in, and you might be tempted to get involved with something which quite possibly you shouldn't get involved with, because you don't really know where it's going to lead. So if something just comes up, or your imagination or your curiosity tempts you to do something that is slightly offbeat, is slightly risky. I would suggest you pass on it. You don't really want to take risks today. I think that would not be a good idea. Sagittarius. Venus is still making a square to Saturn. I talked about Venus square Saturn, I think, in my horoscopes for the weekend. And Venus is also applying to a square of Neptune. So Venus is square of a Saturn-Neptune midpoint, and I continue with my warning for the weekend that certain things could hold you up. They could really try to disrupt the pattern, try to disrupt your pace. Things that are fundamental to who you are, suddenly demanding a lot of attention, and in the process, causing disruption, causing you to stop halfway through. And so be aware of how you interact with the world and how you interact with your home and your family, because there are certain things happening that you don't fully understand, and you could easily just find yourself just coming to a standstill, because you have to just deal with lots of different things, and things that you don't really want to have to deal with. And so what's the best approach? Well, one approach is to be as objective as possible, to not feel that you have to get emotionally involved with everything. I don't think you do have to get emotionally involved. It's just not necessary. And having an objectivity is very much the way forward. You can be there, but you can have a light touch, and you don't have to get obsessed about anything. I mean, you could get obsessed, but I don't think obsession is going to be especially useful. It could just make a difficult situation even worse. And always maintain your freedom of action, and also your social freedom. I think social freedom really does matter today. You need to be able to communicate with whoever you like, and certain people may be very demanding. Indeed, the more you know them, the more demanding they can be, but still you've got to be able to move on. And I think that could be the secret to having a successful day. We also have a sign change, from a lunar sign change. The moon is moving into Aquarius. This morning the moon moves into Aquarius if you're in the United States, and the moon moving into Aquarius, for you, Sagittarius, I think that's probably a good thing. It makes things easier for you, and don't forget the moon joys in the third house. So the moon in Aquarius is in the third house in the Sagittarius chart, because Aquarius is the third sign. Aquarius, Sagittarius is the first sign, Capricorn is the second sign, and Aquarius is the third sign. So with the moon moving into Aquarius, there can be more freedom. There's less to trap you, and the moon is also it's making a conjunction to Pluto, and so really use this conjunction between the moon and Pluto. Moon and Pluto conjunction is going to allow you to really concentrate on something which goes beyond being useful. It could also be transforming, and so it could be about information. You're trying to discover information about something, and it might have been difficult to get the information together, but now if you try hard, you tap into this sort of really valuable stream of knowledge, and by informing yourself about something, you realize how completely important it is. And also that does give you a great feeling of power. And so knowledge is power, information is power, and I think that this is especially the case for you, Sagittarius. Capricorn. Well, Capricorn, we do have now, two planets in your sign. We had the solstice over the weekend, so at the beginning of a new week, you can you can start getting used to the fact that the Capricorn season has well and truly started. Of course, the sun always moves into Capricorn at the same time of year. It always moves into Capricorn just before Christmas, but it's not every Christmas that the sun is in the same sign as Mars, and Sun and Mars are 4 degrees apart. The sun is now getting closer and closer to Mars, and this Sun Mars conjunction, I would regard as being fairly dynamic. It allows you to be yourself, to be really quite assertive. So, if there's anything you want, Capricorn, then I think that there is a very good chance that you can actually get it. So don't feel that anything is being denied to you. If there's something you want and it's reasonable, you definitely have a chance to get hold of it. But then there is the question of how. So Capricorn, broadly speaking, there are two strategies, and either strategy can work. Maybe both strategies can be used together. I mean, one strategy today is just to use your communication skills. You can use your communication skills, extremely well. You can speak with great power. You are really very verbal, and you can take your anger and your grievances, if you have grievances, and you can turn them into words, and those words are really going to be listened to. You will get attention. And don't forget, but we've also got a Sun Mars this Sun Mars conjunction in Capricorn. That really gives you power, and it allows you to be assertive. Indeed, it allows you to be aggressive. So you can take that approach, and you can be very effective. You can perhaps just make demands, and if you use the right words, if you get angry in a controlled kind of way, doors will open. People will, in many cases, give you what you want. But there is a different approach. I think if you just decide to be nice and try to get on with people, try to treat people as human beings, they might respond very well to that, and you might actually be able to get what you want through charm. So maybe you need to try charm first, but if charm doesn't work, then a bit of intelligent anger almost certainly can work. And so, what might you be concerned about? What are you looking for? Well, don't forget money, particularly later in the day, or maybe tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand, because there is a conjunction between the Moon and Pluto. And this conjunction between the Moon and Pluto, it's in Aquarius. It's a very financially orientated place for the conjunction from a Capricorn perspective. And maybe you are obsessed about money. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being obsessed about money. If something is owed to you, if you want some money and you feel that you need to get it now, then I think that you never know. You have the power, and you have the social abilities right now to get what you want. So why wait? Why wait until the Christmas slowdown? I know the Christmas slowdown is already with us, but maybe now is a last chance to get something before Christmas. I mean, if you don't get it, hold it. I mean, don't worry. I mean, I've talked about the Sun Mars conjunction. I think that the Sun Mars conjunction really does make you powerful, and this Sun Mars conjunction is just getting closer and closer and closer. This by the end of the year, I mean, let's look at where Sun and Mars is right at the end of the year. The Sun and Mars will be they still won't be making a conjunction. I mean, the Sun Mars conjunction will happen probably, I think, in the first week of January. So that means that overall, Capricorn, you are getting stronger and stronger and stronger. So if you miss anything today, I mean, don't worry about it. But, today just might be an opportunity to, sort of leverage your power and also perhaps leverage your charm to get to a successful conclusion. Yeah, to get what you want. Aquarius. Moon is starting to move into Aquarius. It moves into Aquarius this morning if you're in the United States, this afternoon, late afternoon if you're in Europe, tomorrow if you're in Australia and New Zealand and East Asia. But moon, when the moon moves into Aquarius, it straight away makes a conjunction to Pluto, and I will be talking about the Moon-Pluto conjunction in some detail, at the end of a video. And the moon, even the Moon-Pluto conjunction, it has its own power. And it's about that Pluto energy, because Pluto has been in Aquarius now for quite a long time. I think Pluto went into Aquarius for the last time I think it was the beginning of November 2024, just as Trump was getting re-elected. So now that the moon is making the conjunction to Pluto, that is perhaps energizing, and you Aquarius start to have a sense of what you can do, what you can achieve, and also what you can manifest. And it's not immediately obvious, at least to other people. Other people may not be aware of what is going on. But Aquarius, you can slowly sort of crank things up, and you can reach a point where you're absolutely sure that you know your priorities. And also with Moon conjunct Pluto, perhaps you get a feeling for what you like and what you don't like. Some things are unacceptable. Perhaps you feel that they are an affront to your independent mindedness. You don't want anything holding you back, and if you want to get your way, you certainly can get your way because of that Moon conjunct Pluto. And in addition, there seems little doubt that if you are annoyed about something, then you can express that annoyance. And you can express that annoyance, with great power, and people will listen to you. So there's no need to be super annoyed to show your annoyance. It's perhaps a question of just slowly cranking it up. How much annoyance do you need to express? I mean, you don't want to show necessarily any annoyance at all, but you need to be perhaps quite verbal, quite vocal in terms of expressing your desires, and perhaps also expressing your displeasure if something isn't right. So, Aquarius, don't feel that you have no influence. Right now you have a considerable amount of influence, and how much influence you have is perhaps up to you. Yeah, and it's how much you want to crank things up. How much influence do you need to have to achieve whatever it is that you want? And you are taking things seriously, and there's nothing wrong with taking things seriously. Some things have to be accomplished, and I think that today you certainly can accomplish them. And I think that a lot of it is connected with your willpower. If you believe that something is possible, then Aquarius, I really do think that it can happen. Pisces. So Pisces, there is not a great deal going on today. I mean, that is perhaps the overall message of this video. You can't expect just non-stop action. I mean, there's pressure for me to create non-stop action. I mean, that is the nature of astrology, isn't it? I mean, it's the nature of this kind of format. Every day is special, but not every day can be special. And so Pisces, I think that perhaps you should just not have too many expectations. Doesn't mean to say that things aren't going to be good. It doesn't mean to say that you can't push things if you have to. Yeah, if you want to push things. I mean, how desperate are you? Okay, if you're really desperate, if you really, really want to make an impact, you want people to listen to you, then fine. I think you can. And it relates to the fact that there is a square between Venus and Saturn. And, Venus and Saturn, I think I talked about it over the weekend. And, Venus square Saturn, it is a difficult aspect. And when you think about Venus, well, Venus is Venus is, in a way, your ruler. I mean, I know that Jupiter's your ruler, but Venus is exalted in Pisces. So Venus is a planet that does have a relationship to you. And so Venus square Saturn, and indeed Venus square Neptune, is that might have an impact on you. So if you wanted to use Venus square Saturn, you made a decision you wanted to use that Venus square Saturn, well, I think you can. And the way it would work is like this, is that, look, Venus is in Sagittarius, so Venus is in quite an extroverted, high-profile part of your chart, and you might be thinking about what you want, particularly if you're going into work, if you have a career or a business. That's what you want. And then it's square Saturn. Now, square Saturn, you might say, oh, well, that's about disappointment. But it even needn't be about disappointment, especially because Saturn is in Pisces. So with Venus square Saturn, it could be about you being really tough and relentless. You don't care. You want things. You want success. You want to be recognized. You don't care that, the fact that it's just before Christmas. You don't care. You want it now. And this is an approach you could take. I'm not saying that is an approach you will take. And I go back to what I said at the beginning of this Pisces piece. I don't think that for most Pisceans, it's going to be a particularly busy day. I don't think there's a lot going on. I think you're probably just going to want to just perhaps even withdraw. I don't think you're going to want to do anything in particular, but there's going to be that minority of Pisces, the Rupert Murdoch kind of Pisces. Of course, Rupert Murdoch is a Piscean, and he's still alive as far as I know. And so, some Pisceans are super ambitious. And if you are super ambitious, if you are a sort of a really relentless kind of Pisces, then that Venus square Saturn might work in your favor. And it might actually enable you to, achieve, real results. The other person, or whoever it is at the receiving end of your demands, might not like it. But if you push it, yes, I think that you can certainly have an impact, though you might not be really appreciated, because it might seem out of not out of character, but rather out of sync for perhaps of the time of year. But overall, Pisces, it is a day of freedom. You do have a lot of freedom today. You can do largely what you want. If you want to stay out of other people's way, you can. But if you feel you want to be a dictator, you want to tell everyone what to do, and you don't care about the costs, then probably you can get away with it, and it should be fine. So overall, Pisces, I have to say that it's probably going to be quite a good day. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I now want to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 62, which is preponderance of the small. Now, this hexagram doesn't move. No moving lines. And really, that reinforces what I was saying with the astrology. So if you've been listening to my forecast of the 12 signs, the general message was not a lot is going on. Yeah, we've got a conjunction between Moon and Pluto, but there aren't any sort of major aspects which we really need to take into consideration. And this is reinforced. This picture is reinforced by the I Ching, preponderance of the small. We should not be trying to achieve great things. We should just focus on what we have, and we shouldn't be drawing attention to ourselves. One image for preponderance of a small is a bird, sort of, and what the bird should do, and the bird shouldn't fly too high. If a bird flies too high, it might get itself into trouble. It can be noticed. It can perhaps be the target of hunters. So we need to stay where we are. And if we look at the structure of the hexagram, if we look at the structure, we've got at the center of it 2 unbroken lines. That is the weight we are bearing, and it is a relatively small weight with very long handles. So these are, if you might see, these are the handles with broken lines on either side. So there shouldn't be very much that we have to do. We shouldn't feel obliged. Instead, we should just do what's in front of us, and certainly not take on anything new. I mean, that would be a bad idea. And because we have no moving lines, we can look at the nuclear hexagram to get an idea about what the underlying picture is. And the underlying picture is the hexagram underlying preponderance of the small is preponderance of the great. And preponderance of the great means that we know that things could get heavy, that things could get difficult. The preponderance of the great represents something huge that we certainly wouldn't want to carry unless we really knew what we were doing. And that's what we want to avoid. Preponderance of the great is the potential of the day. It's saying, what is the underlying thing that we maybe are concerned about, that may relate to the past, it may relate to the future, but it certainly doesn't relate to the now. And so we want to we really want to keep things simple, because we just don't want to take on too much, and we don't have to take on too much. And of course, if we're not taking on too much, that does limit what we can achieve, but it's not a day for achievement. It's a day for just having small targets. We achieve those targets. The larger tasks, the larger victories. They can wait until later. So I know that's boring, but really it's as simple as that. And I want to finish with Moon conjunct Pluto. So if you're talking about Moon conjunct Pluto, it's of course an aspect that is very frequent. It happens once a month, and I can't just talk about Moon conjunct Pluto every month, because that would get boring. I don't think I've talked about Moon conjunct Pluto before in this kind of format. So let's look at the chart of Moon conjunct Pluto, and also ask why Moon conjunct Pluto might be important. Why it might be significant, going beyond just this simple, short-lived aspect. So here's the Moon-Pluto conjunction. So this Moon-Pluto conjunction takes place at 8:37 p.m. London time. And so that would mean it would be sort of perhaps early afternoon if you're in the Americas, tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So here it is. The Moon conjunct Pluto is at 2 degrees 27 Aquarius. So what does that mean? Well, how long does a Moon-Pluto conjunction last for? So the Moon moves approximately half a degree an hour. So you might say that if you take an orb of, say, 3 degrees, I like to be quite conservative with my orbs. So you could say at most 6 hours either side. But because it's right at the beginning of Pluto, beginning of Aquarius, I would have said that this conjunction between the Moon and Pluto is really going to really only start to manifest once the Moon moves into Aquarius. And so then I would have said it just might be 3 hours, 6 hours. Now hold on, let me think. Yeah, maybe 6. Sorry, 6 hours. 6 hours either side if it was in the middle of Aquarius. So I would have said for 6 hours. So from the 6 hours following. So if you're in the UK, say this would be from, say, 10 to 4 in the afternoon through to maybe 10 o'clock in the evening. If you're in the United States, yeah, it will be important. It will be about the central part of the day. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then yeah, you're not going to feel this until tomorrow. If you're in continental Europe, well, you're only an hour ahead of the UK, so that's going to be a similar thing. So last part of the day. So one way of looking at the Moon-Pluto conjunction is that it is just a reminder. It's just a reminder that Pluto is in Aquarius. And sometimes we forget this because, particularly now, we've got Saturn and Neptune have just gone back into Pisces. Uranus has gone back into Taurus. And so people have decided to, in some respects, work on past issues. They're not thinking necessarily about the future, and perhaps the future has been forgotten. Although we're still thinking about that Pluto in Aquarius, and that Pluto in Aquarius becomes prominent. And with Pluto in Aquarius, we do have this contradiction of Aquarius. And when you think back to when Pluto was in Aquarius at the end of the 18th century, you think it went into Aquarius halfway through the American Revolutionary Wars. There is that tension between, on one hand, wanting to be free, to take your freedom, whatever the cost, Pluto in Aquarius, and on the other hand, the totalitarianism of Pluto in Aquarius. And of course, we saw that the totalitarianism of Pluto in Aquarius in the end of the 18th century would, of course, be like with the French Revolution. With the French Revolution, yeah, you had the revolution, and then you had the Great Terror, and governments wanting to be in control. And likewise with the American Revolution, yeah, once the colonists had won their war, then they wanted to be in control. And in the end, the colonists were paying more tax when they were a free state than when they were under the British. That's what governments do. And I think we're seeing Pluto in Aquarius all over the place at the moment. Certainly in the UK and in Europe, governments are trying to take control. They're trying to take control of one's money. They're trying to control one's freedom and freedom of expression. If you say something which goes against the government narrative in Europe, there's a good chance that you will be, you could be arrested. You can be arrested in certain situations, depending exactly on what you're saying. It's easy to be accused, for example, of incitement. So that might be Pluto. That might be Pluto in Aquarius, and so with the Moon making the conjunction to Pluto, many of us just might feel that the power of Pluto is being intensified, if only for a 6-hour period, and maybe that will manifest in terms of real events. And the Moon will also be triggering whatever else Pluto is doing. So the question is, what is Pluto doing? What midpoints is Pluto on? So if you look at the 90-degree dial, let's look at the 90-degree dial. There is, you see, there's the Moon-Pluto conjunction. So we'll put the dial on the Moon. So, you know, what midpoints is Moon-Pluto on? Well, this is the midpoint that catches my attention. It's on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. And it's you know, it's not exactly on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, but it's getting closer. So what's happening is that Mars is, of course, going faster than Uranus and Pluto. So as Mars moves, Pluto moves Pluto moves onto the midpoint, and so the Moon conjunct Pluto is picking up on the fact that Pluto is on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So if you've got Mars-Uranus, a Mars-Uranus pairing it's quite violent. It is about the desire for freedom, perhaps the violent desire for freedom, and it can also just be explosive. So with Pluto on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, you know, you might anticipate you know, quite explosive events, you know, over the next few days as Mars moves onto that midpoint. I can demonstrate this using the sort of midpoint listing. So let me just show you what the listing looks like. So here's the listing on the what's a 45-degree dial. So there is if you look, there is the Mars-Uranus midpoint. Let me make that bigger so you can see exactly what I mean. Okay, so there's the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So you can regard the Mars-Uranus midpoint as kind of like a planet, as a sort of body, a point that is moving. And you have to look at the sort of the average of Mars and Uranus. So Mars-Uranus, that Mars-Uranus midpoint will be moving faster than Pluto on its own. So right now, today, there's Mars-Uranus, the Mars-Uranus midpoint, but it's moving forward. And so it moves forward, and it's moving towards Pluto. And so, you know, over the next day, Mars moves onto that Uranus-Pluto midpoint moves onto Pluto. So in fact, it's not Pluto moving onto the Mars-Uranus midpoint. In fact, it's the Mars-Uranus midpoint moving onto Pluto. So that is something that I think one could regard as being potentially quite violent. I mean, Reinhold Ebertin, in Combination of Stellar Influences, a book I would always recommend that you own. So Ebertin says about Pluto on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, he says, force, violent interventions, higher power. So, you know, that gives you a feel for that. And if we look at what Witter says about Pluto on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, he says, surprise attack, planning executed in too great a hurry, surprising action through which a new development is starting, planning of an ambush. So it's a bit grim, isn't it? And so perhaps we have to be careful. Maybe security services have to be careful with Pluto on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. In terms of manifestation and, you know, different people's charts, you know, the Moon-Pluto conjunction. You know, if you've got a Moon-Pluto conjunction in your horoscope, then that may say something about you and the collective. So if this can have quite a benign effect. So if we, for example, look at the horoscope of Ringo Starr. So here's Ringo Starr's chart, obviously one of the Beatles. Ringo Starr has a Moon-Pluto conjunction in his chart. I mean, in fact, he's got a Moon-Mars-Pluto conjunction in his chart. So you might say That's going to be really difficult. Moon-Pluto, Moon-Mars. You can look at all the problems of that. I know nothing about Ringo Starr in terms of his personality. I mean, okay, he gets a pretty good press, doesn't he? Everyone says, he's sort of pleasant, and no one says anything bad about Ringo Starr. But he has a Moon-Pluto conjunction. Now, it might be, but if he's got a Moon-Pluto conjunction in his chart, Moon in Leo, but he's able to connect with the collective. He was born with Pluto in Leo. Pluto in Leo, you could argue, is very connected with music and rock music and that whole Moon in Leo, that whole Pluto in Leo thing. Leo, the star, the stars on stage. And so with that Moon-Pluto conjunction, he perhaps has the potential for being very successful in music, but perhaps because of that attention. Also, it's drumming, so you could say Moon, Mars, Pluto, there is maybe a lot of energy there which needs to be expressed, and maybe that does take place through his drumming. So I think you could make an argument for saying that if you've got Moon-Pluto conjunction, you can perhaps see it on a personal level, or particularly in his case because it's tied up with Mars. You can see why it might be connected with drumming, but you can also see why it might be connected with being very famous. And Paul McCartney, he does not have an exact Moon-Pluto conjunction, but he does have Moon and Pluto in the same sign. So he's got, okay, I mean, I know it's not a conjunction really, but maybe if you've got Moon in Leo at the same time as Pluto is in Leo, you can really bring down to earth the full power of Pluto in Leo, the spirit of the times. So it's kind of interesting that half the Beatles did have the moon in Leo. Now there's another side to Moon-Pluto conjunction, and Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Now again, he did not have an exact Moon-Pluto conjunction in his horoscope, but he did have Moon and Pluto in his chart, and so he did have Moon and Pluto both in Leo, and so you might say that the Moon represents his response, how he responds, and so perhaps with Moon-Pluto, he's just responding to just everything going on around him. So he was born in 1942. So he was sort of the same generation as the Beatles, but showing his. Showing that Moon-Pluto in a different way. So going back to so Paul McCartney was born. Well, this is kind of interesting because Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and Paul McCartney were both Geminis. They both had Moon and Pluto in the same sign, but in their cases they expressed it in different ways. In Ted Kaczynski's case, he was upset about what was happening to the environment. I mean, Paul McCartney, to an extent, I think, is also upset about aspects of the world, particularly him and Linda McCartney being concerned about the treatment of animals, and they're doing it they're responding to it through campaigning and through charity and promoting vegetarianism. But Ted Kaczynski does it in a different way. He did it through sending bombs to people in a very sort of in a way that was not just destructive, but almost certainly, well, definitely counterproductive. Move forward, Moon in Virgo, Elon Musk. Again, Elon Musk does not have an exact Moon-Pluto conjunction, but maybe if you've got the Moon in the same sign as Pluto, in terms of your response, you're able to somehow fit in and express whatever is going on in the collective, and that's certainly something that Elon Musk is able to do. Now, someone who does have an exact Moon-Pluto conjunction is Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. Now, his Moon-Pluto conjunction, very much so, he has got an exact Moon-Pluto conjunction. So we might be seeing Moon-Pluto conjunction in a different way here. Certainly he's able to understand the way things are going. He is able to adapt to the zeitgeist, but at the same time, there is a sense of power. Power is important. Perhaps in Moon-Pluto Virgo, it's having power, well, almost for the sake of it, having control through his roles, in central banks, and now as Prime Minister of Canada. It's just very central to him, and it's not just Moon-Pluto in Virgo. It's also Moon-Pluto conjunct Mars. So here is someone probably who is very obsessed about power. I mean, it doesn't mean to say he's a bad person. It doesn't mean to say that his policies are bad. I'm not giving any opinions here. But if you, perhaps having Moon-Pluto conjunction can help you if you want a political career. And finally, one other chart I wanted to look at. It's a slightly different chart. It's the chart for the beginning of 1945, the moment 1945 starts. And so here is the chart for 1945. And midnight, January the 1st, 1945. It's a political event. But, when a new year is important, and in a few days' time I'll be looking at the chart of 2026. This chart is set for Alamogordo, where the first nuclear explosion started. Remember, it was a plutonium bomb, the first explosion, nuclear explosion. And there was a Moon-Pluto conjunction at the beginning of 1945 set for Alamogordo. So it was a Moon-Pluto year. And so you might link Moon and Pluto, that Moon-Pluto conjunction, with a plutonium bomb and the explosion of, there were 2 plutonium bombs exploded in 1945 and 1 uranium bomb. There were the first one was at Alamogordo with the first test, and the second one was in Nagasaki. And of course, the Hiroshima bomb was uranium based. And there are some sort of interesting semi-squares. So the Moon was semi-square Jupiter. Jupiter was rising in Virgo at the beginning of the year. So Jupiter, but this was Jupiter rising in Virgo, set for Alamogordo at that place, and that was the most important, the place when arguably one of the most important events of 1945, the explosion of the explosion of the first nuclear weapon. So Jupiter was rising, and the Moon was exactly semi-square Jupiter, and likewise Pluto was exactly semi-square the ascendant. So there may be a way of looking at the Moon-Pluto in a different way, perhaps in a more material way. Pluto is connected with plutonium, and so Moon-Pluto could represent, the beginning of the year where the first plutonium bomb was exploded. So that's all I'm going to say about the Moon-Pluto conjunction. I hope you found that of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.